Plants Forever, and I'm excited to talk today about one of my favorite things, which is nature, which is what we are finally in. Thank you very much. I'm so happy, and this is such a great little canopy with the shade. It's perfect for this conversation. All things biophilia, biophilic design, these are terms that you may be hearing in your workplace or just in social conversations. Biophilia is simply just means nature, living systems. And basically what happened in the 1980s, there was a term that came up called biophilic design because there was a big migration into urban areas. And so urbanization, people coming in, you think about how many people have ever lived in New York? Anybody here? Of course we have some, I know people New Yorkers. But you know, the height of the meaning, you think all this concrete that you're connected to, right? But then we also fast forward into 2021, and we have this, right? Could we ever be apart from this? Definitely not, right? This is like our life. I know, right? So this is, you know, we are becoming inundated in a web of circuitry, and the question is, how is that impacting us? How is it really impacting us in terms of our mental health, our emotional health, I mean, say our spiritual health, our physical health? You know, you think about the multiplication process of that. So biophilic design has come about, and these are, just so you know, I am on a journey learning about biophilic design. I do not claim to be an expert on this because my business partners with interior designers. Obviously we offer horticulture and holiday design, so I am learning about biophilic design, but certainly this is something we do a lot of and we talk a lot about. So when you think about, I just went on a hike. I was telling Denise about my great hike I went on Easter. I had not hiked in a while. I was feeling kind of pudgelicious because of COVID. And I thought, you know, we need to go on a hike. So I told my son, I was like, there's this hike up in North Georgia. And he's like, oh yeah, I know that. That's easy. It'll be fine. 8 miles later, I thought I was going to die, okay? But I realized, because I started studying this, that all those things that I had read, the 14 principles, actually I experienced on my hike. Things like risk, you know, peril when I was crossing the log. I thought I was going to die and kill myself in the water. And then these great roots that I saw and the patterns of repetition in the nature. So when you think about that, biophilic design is going to harness all that, put it through the principles, and put it into something like Deb's Plaza, which is what Beck does. Deb's Plaza is a great place to go see some biophilic design. Or you can go over to the Apple store. Apple and Linux put in 2 beautiful green trees, and they've got all this clear, you know, wall. It's see-through, it's transparent, so all that natural light comes in. But they went a step further, and they put 2 more trees in the concrete right there on the sidewalk. So there's a really great line of what's going on. And if you go inside the shopping center, you'll see a beautiful living wall inside. Okay, so that's a great example of biophilic design. If you go over to True Foods, something as simple as a restaurant. Anybody been to True Foods? Lots of plant material in there, right? Keeping it connected and present. I think one of the things that I'm most fascinated with biophilic design is, and I brought my little book because I wanted everybody to know about this, it's called the Biophilic Effect. There's lots of these books out there. Your Brain on Nature, the Biophilic Effect, there's lots of these that you can find. But there's some fascinating studies about what happens when nature comes into our places where we live, where we work, and where we play. So let's talk about where we live. Obviously, you know, if you have plants in your home or you create spaces where you have a great view outdoors, that's good for you. But let's talk about where we work, okay? So if you think about, what's a good example of this? There's so many. Interface. Anybody seen the Interface building? Yes. That's a great example. That's probably one of our prime examples here in Atlanta. They actually took photographs of a forest, and you can probably speak to this as well. And that print is put on the outside of the building. It's a local forest here in Atlanta, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's local to the area. And then we get into conversations about fractals, which is a whole other conversation we won't go down. But there's some amazing studies. I encourage you, if you want to find a great website, go to Terrapin, which is Bill Browning, who's a thought leader in this space. And they do all the like heady stuff. They do all the research and the data. And so it becomes, what I've learned is I've studied this, and I have plants. Like, I sell plants. That's what I do. I design with plants. What I've realized realized is that the impact goes much further than just what I like to call a woo-woo conversation. This is much bigger than that, okay? They did a test once where in a regular shopping center, they put a fish tank in a store, right? Just a fish tank in a store. They wanted to see how often people would look at that fish tank. They didn't sell fish. They didn't sell water. They didn't sell anything having to do with fish. They just wanted to test the natural element in a built environment. They were able to track eye movement. They were able to track to see how many people went into that store. And of course, I don't have the statistics off the top of my head, but it was significant. Retail space is another great space. I just wrote an article for IIDA and I interviewed our friend here for that article. What's happening in retail? You know, when you look at how long will someone stay in a store that is implementing biophilic principles? If they stay in the store longer, what are they going to do? They're going to spend money, right? So when we talk about economics of biophilic, biophilic design, there's a whole portion of that we can discuss. Let's talk about where we play. I'm getting ready to go to the beach on Saturday. What is the thing we want to do? What's the first thing you want to do when you go to the beach? Put your feet in the water. What else? Get a margarita. What is it that you want to see when you go to the beach? When you're sitting on your patio or whatever you're seeing.
The waves, the ocean.
What we sometimes forget about, my in-laws had a condo. We're going down to St. Augustine to Jacksonville Beach, and there's the patio or the home that you sit in, wherever it is, and there is the horizon line, right? Right? There is something very, very, what's the word I want to use? There's a real mental, emotional, physical change that occurs when we look at these patterns in nature, okay? So staying connected to nature, I would challenge everybody, when you go home today, I want you to think about and look at your phone, because the phone can track this, because the phone can track everything in our lives, everything. How much time have you spent on your phone? Like, just go and see. How much time, when you get home, how much time are you spending on Netflix? My personal favorite's Blackflix. How much time do you spend on your computer just within a week? And then compare that to how much time you're connecting to nature, right? Think about that. And of course, how much time you connect with people. People are even more important, but you can connect with people in nature, right? You can go have a picnic, you can go for a walk, you can do things like this. I cannot stress the importance enough when you think about biophilic design. Some of the principles that come into play obviously are natural light, big window space. I had a very practical situation that happened. I moved my desk in my office. I have a big window, and Devin can vouch for this. I had my desk next to a wall. I still had the window. I thought, well, that'll work, right? And I thought, no, I'm just going to move my desk over here. So I had this great view outdoors. It was significant. I looked forward to coming into my office, sitting at my desk. My focus was better. It was really kind of personal for me. I thought, wow, that's like a little tiny thing that I did, right? My Florida room in my home looks out into my backyard because I have glass. Same thing, what you hear, the sensory, think about all the senses. What do you hear in those spaces? How is the airflow? There are things such as blocked view. Not everything has to be a certain view. So if you have time, I encourage you to go and explore those things more deeply, but also to be reading about why being connected to nature is so important to us. There are several books, several things that you can check out. The bees, I want to talk about the bees. Sorry, I'm just kind of jumping around here. I read a project, they actually used the honeycomb pattern in beehives and created that out of a really natural wood piece, put that into a design. An interior designer did that. So I went into a property just recently over off of Powers Ferry. It's called the Dupree Building. And I was so excited. I walked in, they had me go over there to check out their horticulture and their holiday. And I didn't want to leave the building. It was all created in forest green. They had tables were out of natural wood. They had taken the same wood that they cut from the tree and made panels that went on the wall. And the security desk had that. And this was probably, I don't know, this building's probably built in 1990. You know, it's your classic Class A office space in Atlanta, right? So someone had come in there, the design firm had come in and implemented some really great ideas. And I just wanted to hang out. I was so excited I was going to get to work in that space. So, questions? Can I answer any quick questions? We only have a little bit of time today. I don't want to take up too much, but I wanted to give you a highlight reel of just some of these ideas and thoughts, where you can see them in Atlanta, where you can explore more. There is the Biophilic Institute, and there is the Biophilic Summit, which happens down at Serenbe. That'll be coming up in the fall, so if you don't know about that, that's something to put on your radar. Questions? Yes.
You were talking about those, the different points, like risk, and the patterns. Can you talk a little bit more about those?
So if you look at the handout that I gave everybody, I'll go through this and we can read through it. I cannot go through every single one of these. I'm on a journey of learning about these as well as you are. But I do want to talk about nature in this space. You'll see here there are 7: visual connection with nature, right? Non-visual connection to nature. Non-rhythmic sensory stimuli. That's the other thing. Somebody was talking about, who was talking about the train? Scott was talking about the train. It made me think about, it's not specific to this necessarily, but sound, you know, you think about how sound plays out in where you live or where you work, you know, a repetition of sound. Repetition's a big part when you think about this. I was telling him I had an uncle who always wanted to have a fan. You know, that's not really part of nature per se, I don't know, but there's something about that that can be very comforting to think about. So, presence of water, you know, you think about when I was on my hike, I had the brook that I thought was, you know, when I crossed over I might die, but that was a different conversation, but very soothing to hear the water as I went up to the waterfall at the end of the 8-mile hike. You think about dynamic and diffused lighting. That's just how lighting is coming into the space. It's important in a place to have lighting that is not just set. You don't have, you know, you just don't turn the on button and it's just, that's all you get, right? We want to have different kinds of lighting. Connection with natural systems. And if you go to the next page, you've got natural analogs. Biomorphic forms and patterns. Our Beck person can talk to this. I want him to mention what they're doing at Phipps. Why don't you jump on this, because you guys are using some of this in your canopy on the other side of Phipps.
Yeah, so it's biomorphic, we call it biomimicry, which is basically learning and borrowing from geometry that's found naturally, like in the world around us, essentially. So the most common analog is probably canopies, you know, taking the shade of the tree and things like that. So we probably went through 40 to 50 iterations with Simon, and ultimately the one that was honestly most appealing for everybody was literally just mimicking the canopy of the tree. It actually looks like the second image, more or less, with sort of that central trunk, smaller branches, and this is essentially tessellated into non-harsh angles, which is kind of the whole theory of nature, but like you don't ever see like a 90-degree angle like naturally occurring.
Right.
It's everything's a little softer, everything's either a obtuse or acute, something like that. It's sort of inherently harsh. And using that idea to sort of inform how that is made.
One thing that he and I talked about that I'll share with you all that I know that will be relevant is we had a really interesting conversation about how, you know, I remember when Lenox was a closed shopping center. Anybody remember that? Or I mean, it was an open shopping center, sorry. And then it became closed. And now everybody wants to go back outside, right? It's kind of interesting how things, you know, you wonder, like I think we're having this conversation about biophilic design and all things nature, but in my grandmother's day, they probably didn't need to talk about that because everybody was already doing that, right? So it kind of shows you where we're headed in general. Atlanta has a great tree canopy, by the way, so everybody, if you don't know that, we're the city in, you know, the city in the trees. It's a great thing for our city. Material connection with nature, complexity and order. Why don't you speak to complexity and order a little bit for us?
Oh man, I'm on the spot today.
Sorry.
You know, actually lightly touched on, I mean, you talk about order in the sense of like, I'll say the brick house like right behind us. It's a highly ordered, highly structured facade versus like if you just kind of like do this and get these 3 trees right here with this sort of very, it's almost noisy, if you will. So it's sort of like the interface facade where you can kind of, there's something there, you understand it, but your brain's not trying to like make pictures out of that. And it's funny, like the human brain can handle and likes both in a way, like almost like structure as much as it likes chaos, for lack of a better word. But in the end, I mean, I think the most successful thing of that is really just the combination of the two. Because there's always sort of natural order, even in all of buildings. About, say, the lobby of any office building is generally very open, very inviting, and then you kind of move up and it gets more private, which is generally considered to be more closed. My generation is the rebels who are like, no, we're open, everybody see me, but don't talk to me.
Right.
But it's a tough balance. I mean, there's obviously the two not opposing ideas, but complementary ideas in a way. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think balance is a good note in this conversation. When we think about just, I think a lot about just how nature's impacting my life. How much am I connecting to it? How am I connecting to it? And when we think about technology in relation to nature, that's why I said trying to find the balance in that in your own life. It's interesting too when you think about how the trend of even restaurants, the farm to table experience, like why is that such a trend? Because we don't go to our garden per se. Some may, but it's not the average person who would go to their garden and pull up their own produce and be able to eat it at their table. So people are willing to pay for that. So this is a huge conversation, but I hope today that you will be able to take with you some starter thoughts about this. And I do think it's a worthy conversation for, as a team, as a sustainability committee, for us to continue to think about, that even being able to go see a property like Interface might be a good field trip to actually see how it's implemented. I know for me, that's something that's on my, to-do list in this process. And obviously to have some other people who can come into the mix to speak to some of these things. There are a few, for me, because I'm not really a hardcore science person either, I'm very experientially driven, but I did find as I started doing my research and reading, especially on the research and the data that's being collected, I think that's what's been most impressive to me and really surprisingly fascinating for me to engage with. My one last thing I'm going to give with you to take away regarding my hiking trip again is that, when there's a really great rain and you go hiking, that's one of the best times to go hiking because of what's in the air. The elixir that naturally forms is a really good thing for you to be breathing in. So nature provides many things already. It's always been here. It will always be here. And I think it's something that we need